It's been over a week since the Imps suffered heartbreak at Sincil Bank, yet we're still all in high spirits. There's so many positives to take, so many players to praise, and so many memorable moments to discuss. So for one last time in the 23-24 season, welcome to the Stacey West Review Show. Right, welcome back to the Stacey West YouTube channel for one last monthly review of the year. Well, I say monthly review, but in fact, this time it's a full season review. We have team of the seasons, player of the seasons, and so much more for all you statos out there. I'm your host, Charlie Beeston, but I am, of course, not on my own. Joining me, first of all, is my regular co-host on these monthly shows, and the man who symbolises that term stato perfectly. It's Mr. Chris Lamming. Chris, how are we doing?
Hello. Very well. Yeah, very well. Had a week to get over the disappointment of last weekend against Portsmouth. Though, to be honest, it only took a day or so, didn't it? We was in high spirits at the presentation evening. Well, yes, I'm all right. I think it's been a good season overall. We've had a real enjoyable ride for the last 3 or 4 months or so. So, yes, here we are to talk about the season as a whole.
Absolutely. And also joining me is a man whose Lincoln City knowledge is unrivaled. It is, of course, founder of the Stacey West, Gary Hutchinson. Gaz, how are we doing?
I'm good, mate. Thank you. Thank you for having me on again. I was just thinking we ought to get Chris glasses and a dressing gown to wear on these shows. Stato, that's what he wore. You two are too young.
Right. Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, you totally lost me.
I mean, if I'm too young, that makes me feel pretty good, to be honest, mate.
Especially when you're in the same recording as me here, Chris, let's be honest. So look, it's been a season full of highs and lows. It's been a season where we came oh so close. But I mean, I guess I just want to throw it over to both of you. Just summarise this season in terms of on the pitch and off the pitch. What's it meant to be a Lincoln fan this year?
Progression. Huge forward, particularly the second half of the season. But it's amazing, isn't it? Like how far we've come in the last couple of seasons. I was, particularly when Mark Kennedy joined the club a year or so ago, or just over a year ago, wasn't it? But like it was a bit of a crossroads at that time, weren't we? After Michael Clapperton's challenging second / third season, and particularly the last 6 months off the pitch, we've been saying it for ages. The club's in a great place, but particularly since Michael Skripala's come in, we've come on leaps and bounds as a club, and it just feels that there's some real unity now. So for me, the biggest highlight this season won't necessarily be the run or the great performances on the pitch. It will be that unity and that togetherness that there seems to really be now between the whole club, from board to staff to players, and specifically with fans as well. So I think for me, it's progression overall, and that kind of unity and togetherness that really feels like we're all part of something again now.
Yeah, I kind of second that. I mean, it was 2 years ago that Mark Kennedy joined the club rather than a year ago, and it yeah, I know. For me, it was a move away from something that I wasn't keen that we were becoming. I think Lincoln was changing since the Michael Appleton first season, where we were free flowing and we were. Yeah, people talk about where we were in the league, but for me, it was the style of football. We were scoring goals. We were doing well. And then we began to tail off, and we became functional. We became quite, I hesitate to say anti-football, because we could play a little bit. And at the beginning of this season, particularly after August, I think there was a lot of hope that we could shed that. And there was Wickham 3-0 and there was Blackpool 3-0. Both games, by the way, where 3-0 flattered us. But we came away saying, well, there's more to come. We're in a good position. And then I think that began to tail off, and everything just began to feel fractured, like it was breaking up a little bit for me. And so for me, there's an element of relief in this season as well. There's an element of like turning a little pressure tap and just letting all of that kind of negativity that was building up, some of it hidden, some of it not hidden. You know, I think I was open about what I've been feeling for a month or two. Charlie certainly was as well. Yeah, so I think it's really interesting to see where we're going from now on.
I just want to echo that word relief that you used there, because for me, relief was the feeling I felt when Michael Appleton was let go, or agreed to move on at the end of a couple of seasons ago, because I was a Michael Appleton supporter, especially during that last season when he was getting a lot of stick. But I felt that sense of relief when he went, because it kind of, hopefully, we very much hoped that it would kind of cure that fracture that had happened in the fan base. And I think that it started to do that under Mark Kennedy, but then we ran the risk of that kind of same situation happening again. And when you now have Michael Skubala in, there's just no chance that you can really see anything like that happening. Like Chris was saying, very much that unity, that togetherness is so prevalent up and down the club and the fans, players, board, everybody. So it's a real great football club to be a part of and to be a fan of this year, and hopefully beyond as well. So look, we've summarised the season there in our own words. Why don't we have a little look at who we've picked as our team of the seasons? Here we go then, the first of our 3 team of the season. So we've actually, spoiler alert, got 3 totally different, well, not totally different, but we've got 3 different team of the seasons between us. So Chris, let's start off with yours. Talk us through the players that you've picked.
Well, let's start with the easiest one. Lucas Jensen in goal. Not just our best goalkeeper, he's League One's best goalkeeper by quite some margin, as we're going to discuss later. So I think that obviously goes without saying. And someone else who I think goes without saying is actually Sean Rowan. I think Sean Rowan has had an absolutely superb season, particularly under Michael Skubala once he's got himself in the team. To have that natural left foot on that left of a back 3 just suits him perfectly. And there's not many players in this team that are irreplaceable. And he isn't irreplaceable. But we do lose a lot when he's not available. When there's the few games where he was at a knock or when he was unavailable and we had to play someone else there, we were still solid enough. We really lost something in terms of that back 3 balance. So I think Sean Rowan is an automatic pick for me at that left centre back. Paudie O'Connor has been a man mountain of a real leader this season, again, particularly towards the end of the season. And then Alex Mitchell has kind of gone from being someone who was a reliable deputy, and it was almost like O'Connor, Mitchell and Jackson were just replaceable with each other, weren't they? And as long as you had 2 of the 3 playing, it was just much of a muchness. And to be honest, that could have been the case at any point this season, and it could have gone for any of the 3. But for me, I think a team of the season has to work in terms of it would actually function as a team, unlike a Garth Crooks team of the season or team of the week on BBC. And I think for that to happen, you have to play your best players in their best positions. And Paudie, as much as he is deputised left centre-back and right centre-back, he's been a rock in the centre of the back 3. And Alex Mitchell has been our most consistent and our best performer, I think, in the right-hand side of the 3. Jacko is incredibly unlucky to miss out here because he's been really reliable when he's played. And maybe there's a little bit of recency bias here because Jacko hasn't been in the team as much in the last few months. But of course, that has coincided with our incredibly good run. So, yeah, back 3, Mitchell, O'Connor and Rowan. Lars Sorensen, right wing back. I think Lars kind of picks himself as well. And Rico Hackett, I think he does predominantly, even though we have had quite a few different players playing in that left wing back role for the duration of this season. Rico has become Michael Skubala's preferred choice, and obviously has had played a real key part in some key moments in games. Ethan Arahan playing in the number 6 role. Enough said. Obviously, he's going to play there. And Ethan Hamilton, of course, missed the last few months, but was one of our best performers in the early part of the season. I think absolutely deserves to play. And I think of the players that we've had in the squad, if he was fit, he would have absolutely been a nailed-on starter for the rest of the season. Front 2 of Taylor and House, which feels odd considering Taylor's only been with us for half a season. House kind of has only been fit for less than that. But they've both been our most prominent front 2 in the run that propelled us up the league. And then I think the big one is I've gone for Ted in there over someone else. But we're going to touch on that later, aren't we, in terms of more of a direct comparison. So there we are.
Well, that is an unbelievably strong squad. And who knows what could have happened if we had that team for the whole season and that team fit for the whole season. But ifs and buts and all that. Now, Gary, let's move on and have a little look at your team of the season. Then talk us through who you've picked.
Yeah, well, first of all, if we'd had this 11 for 45 games this season, we wouldn't be in the playoffs. We'd be in the Championship now, in my opinion, because we would have amassed enough points to have finished second or third. Because I don't believe that the Derby side that got promoted were all that special. They were good, but I think that they were beatable. So I'm not going to go over every player by player, because there are some, as Chris has already picked up on, that are kind of solids in there, but there are one or two I do just want to pick up on particularly. I'm going to echo the Sean Rowan comments, and I'm sure it's going to pop up quite a bit through this. So I think Sean Rowan is the most criminally underrated player in our squad. On a match day, I often hear lots of praise for O'Connor or Jackson or Mitchell, and then someone will go, "Oh, Rowan," because he puts a pass astray or something like that. But he's a completely different type of centre-back, and the way that we play doesn't work without Sean Rowan, because the fact is he's the one that then drops further out to the left when Hackett goes forward, when we go to kind of a 4, when we're pushing forward and all that sort of thing. So for me, it's his intelligence and it's his ability and natural left-footedness that allows us to play the way that we do. He's almost, and that's in inverted commas, almost as critical to the way we play as Ethan Arahan, but that is an almost. I have gone a little bit differently in the centre of defence, and I'll rationalise why for everybody. I haven't picked Pordy O'Connor. This isn't because Pordy has had a bad season. Not at all. He's been leader, a captain, and as Chris said, he's interchangeable. Jackson, Mitchell, O'Connor, you can swap them around any which way you wish. Any combination of those two is good enough. I've gone for Adam Jackson over Pordy O'Connor for the simple reason Adam Jackson wasn't sent off twice this season, which is why I'm putting him in my team of the season. Because for me, a team of the season is the 11 players who have excelled the most. And O'Connor, whilst but certainly one of his red cards was incredibly harsh, which was the elbow, wasn't it? I can't remember who it was against now, but it was a shocking red card. Northampton, maybe, possibly, I can't remember. But for me, Adam Jackson barely ever gets booked, let alone red carded. And for that reason alone, I've kind of negated the recency bias, as Chris mentioned, and gone for Adam Jackson. Plus, I just like the guy personally. And that's not to say I dislike Pordy O'Connor. They're both great guys, but I dare not put Alex Mitchell in because he's been outstanding as well. So you know what I mean? It's how you juggle that around. No point in going into left back and right back. They pick themselves, or the wing backs. No point in going to Ethan Arahan because he is a staple. Water is wet, the sun is warm. Ethan Arahan is good. All that sort of stuff. Now, Ethan Hamilton, I just want to remind people that there was a stage just after Michael Skabala first came in where if you said Ethan had a superb game in the middle today, the first thought was Hamilton, not Arahan, because there was an ever so slight drop-off with Ethan Arahan around the time that Mark Kennedy left. I mean, it was slight, but it was enough for people to notice, whereas Ethan Hamilton was the one player who I felt was always in form during that period. And bear in mind, he's the one that there's rumours of him having a bit of a Barney around the dressing room as well on the Burton game. So I'm not sure he was entirely happy like a lot of the squad were at that time, but he was one that I never saw any drop off. Losing him was absolutely detrimental. And that's crazy when you think we lost 2 in 20 or whatever. But losing him was detrimental. But it may also have allowed us to be more attacking because we had Mandroyo or Bishop in often at the same time, which gave us quite a lot of creativity. I've gone for Ted over Danny Mandroyo. Again, I think there's a degree of the red cards there, the double red cards, whilst you can't lay blame. I think when you've got 2 players that have had 5, 6, 7, 8 match bans or whatever they've had over the course of the season, it does make it more difficult for me to pick those in a team over and above players that have not had that kind of level of discipline. And with Danny Mandroyo, it was indiscipline. Whether Pordy's was or not, that's open to debate. But with Danny Mandroyo, there were 2 indisciplined tackles, which for me just kind of blotted the copybook a little bit. There's very little between the 2. I know Chris has got some stats a little bit later on. I know you're going to argue Danny Mandroyo's case, but I like Bishop in the way that we play, carrying the ball forward. I think he's a little bit more of a goal threat, although he's massively underperformed his XG this season. Taylor and House picked themselves. I actually think had we had the luxury of easing Ben in a little more than we did, I think we might have got a little more out of him. I think between him being fit and the end of the season, he was in and out with fitness. I'm not convinced we've ever seen a fully fit Ben House. And so to a degree, I think his coming back, whilst it was big for the team, we didn't see the best of him. But then Fred came back and he also struggled a little bit with injuries and that sort of thing. And we saw towards the end of the season what Fred is capable of. So Fred's the other one that maybe goes in there. But, Chris said it's crazy picking Taylor. He's only had 6 months. But we had 6 months or 5 months or whatever you want to call it without a striker. So when you're having to pick 2 strikers for his team of the season and you haven't had them, you're not going to pick Jack Vale. And with the greatest respect to Jovan, he ain't going to be in there as well. So those two kind of pick themselves.
I forgot Jack Vale played for us this season.
What about Shadipo? Is he not getting in the squad anywhere?
Mark Kennedy didn't pick it.
Shadipo is the only player in League One with a 100% shot on target to goal ratio.
That's quality.
That was a little something I found out earlier. Right, so let's have a little look then at who I've picked. I mean, some of them have sort of been alluded to. But we've got Lucas Jensen in goal. It's obviously Sorensen, Hackett, wing backs. Alex Mitchell and Sean Rowan, again, I think similar, kind of echoing your guys' thoughts. I think they sort of pick themselves as well. Obviously, it's really, really difficult to not have one of those centre halves, one of those right-footed centre halves in the squad. Obviously, I've gone for O'Connor over Adam Jackson. Captain, leader. I think his output in terms of what he's done this season, actually, when you look at the stats as well for Paudie O'Connor, is just better than Jacko. I think what Jacko did perfectly well was he was an absolute stalwart in that defence when we were struggling. And that's what very much set him apart from somebody like an O'Connor. But I just think over the course of the season, O'Connor's been the stronger player. Sean Rowan, I mean, I just want to echo what you were saying earlier, Gaz, about his kind of intelligence in being able to suit this system perfectly. We praise Michael Scubala's side for being this really kind of fluid team, attacking team, but that doesn't happen if you don't have Sean Rowan in that role. It's as simple as that. We can't have that fluidity going forward if we don't have him. So huge credit to Sean Rowan there. And again, he picks himself, same as Aaron. Hamilton, again, I mean, he had 2 player of the months earlier in the season on the site, 2 very deserved player of the months earlier in the season. He was shoo-in for player of the season in January when we were having these discussions. So there's no reason why he still shouldn't be in a team of the season. Danny Manjoya, I'll come on to in a second. Joe Taylor, again, I mean, yes, okay, he's only been here for 6 months, but he's finished top goal scorer. Like, we've got to recognise that. And then Ben House, I think Ben House, for me, is genuinely one of my favourite ever Lincoln City strikers. I've always loved Ben House since he's come in for everything that he does, both off the ball, but also on the ball. I think he sometimes can be a little bit underrated because of how strong his off-the-ball work is. And also, Ben House this season, in all of the games he's played, are 2.15 points per match. That is second in the whole of League One. So it's you might say it's a coincidence because he came back when we started doing well, but he was a part of the reason why we were doing so well during that run. So Ben House deserves credit for that. And like I say, Danny Mandroyu going to very much come on to with this because I just think for his output this season, although I really, really like Ted and everything that he can bring to the team, I just think Danny Mandroyu's output this season can't be ignored. He's got double the amount of goals. He's got more assists. Yes, okay, he has got those 2 red cards that were because of ill discipline. But I think the way he was able to sort of turn himself around after New Year, even though he had a pretty difficult first half of the season when you bear in mind everything with Mark Kennedy and his red cards, I think we really have to praise Danny Mandroy for that. And also, and this feels a little bit weird to be saying today, only a week and a bit after the Portsmouth game, but in front of goal in terms of penalties, he is very, very strong. Just unfortunately wasn't quite on that day, but that certainly wasn't his fault. So look, there's a few sort of points of contention with those teams. So I think we're going to take a little look, first of all, at the defenders. Because like I say, we've all picked 3 defenders. A couple of us have been different on some of them. So let's have a look at the defender comparison. Now, we've said that Sean Rowan effectively picks himself as that left-footed, left-sided player. So we've got to pick, and it's been the case all season, whenever me and Chris have been doing this, and whenever you've joined us, Gary, we've always been arguing about which 2 of these 3 have to play. And it's always been really, really difficult. And these are the stats for the defender comparisons. Ignore the fact that there isn't an E on the end of Paudie's name. I was making these graphics at 7:00 this morning. All right, leave me alone. In terms of minutes, Paudie O'Connor more minutes than the other 2. So the tackles per 90, Alex Mitchell blowing the others out of the water. In terms of interceptions, Paudie O'Connor better than the others. Fouls per 90, Alex Mitchell's had the fewest, which is obviously better. Paudie O'Connor had the most, and obviously the 2 red cards in there as well. Clearances per 90, all quite similar, but Paudie just edging the other 2 out on that one. Blocks per 90, say similar, they're literally the same. And pass success percentage is Adam Jackson. And I was a little bit surprised, actually, that Adam Jackson's pass success percentage was 10% better than Alex Mitchell's. That was the sort of surprising stat that I saw from this. All these
position on the pitch, though, isn't it? I'd say Jacko has almost consistently played central, so the majority of his passes are going to be shorter, kind of to the outside centre halves or into a centre midfielder. From that centre back position, you don't often see the centre back knocking the ball forward long from us. It's normally when the ball goes to the outside centre back, it's either again a short pass or it's a clip down the line, and that clip will obviously is then going to be contested more. So I wouldn't read too much into the past success, to be honest, considering if we're comparing Mitchell and Jacko specifically for that reason.
Absolutely. I mean, also when you bear in mind like diagonal passes, Alex Mitchell's against Reading, where he lofted it all the way across to Sean Rowan, who then played it inside for Freddie Draper, crossed it in, didn't he? And Freddie got the goal. Like, those are the sorts of passes that you hope that a wide centre half can do. But I mean, Gaz, when you look at those stats, is there anything that kind of jumps out at you and surprises you in terms of differences, or does it just kind of show the strength and depth that we've got in that position?
Well, there's not much between the two, is there? Because you've got kind of Alex Mitchell and Paudie O'Connor swapping between top and bottom of the three in different stats, and then Adam Jackson sitting in the middle. There's no aerial duels, successful aerial duels per 90 there, I notice. Aerial duels won, whereas actually Adam Jackson is at 57.81, Alex Mitchell 57.35, and Paudie O'Connor 54.87. I mean, it's marginal, but that's something Adam Jackson does come out on top of as well. Kind of in my defence of picking him, I just think it goes to show, first of all, that Paudie's name is much better spelt without the E. It looks more it looks more like 16-year-old girl Paudie with a heart over the I. I think would work. No, the minutes have actually surprised me, if I'm honest. Because Alex Mitchell obviously came in a little bit later and didn't get immediately into the side. Paudie with all of those bans, it surprises me how few minutes Adam Jackson's played compared to the others. But then I think obviously Paudie and Alex kind of cemented their position towards the end of the season. I think Adam was unlucky in that he picked up an injury at a time where both Alex Mitchell and Paudie were fit. And he's unlucky because he's picked up an injury in the one position where if you get injured, there is no guarantee you're coming back in the side. You're a striker for Lincoln City, or a wing back, or a central midfielder, a first team player, and you get injured, 95% certain you're coming straight back into that side at some point. And that's one thing that kind of devalues my argument, by the way, against Adam Jackson and enhances your point on Paudie O'Connor. Is as soon as he came back from his suspension, he was reinstated to the squad. And I don't think that was purely because he's the captain. I think it's the way that he leads. I think any of those three players grace the first team of the other 23 teams in League One. Any of them at all. It's a one area we're so strong in.
I absolutely echo that. I mean, what I want to pick up on is the consistency. And I mean, I'm going to pick up on Alex Mitchell because...
Of course you are.
He came in against Sheffield United, away from home against Premier League Sheffield United. He makes his debut. And the fans immediately just fell in love with him as a player because of what he embodies as a defender is exactly what you want. And since then, I cannot recall Alex Mitchell having a bad game. Now, I'm not saying that I can recall Adam Jackson or Paudie O'Connor having a bad game, but you look at Paudie O'Connor, those 2 red cards, Adam Jackson not quite played as many minutes. I just think the consistency at a top level that Alex Mitchell's shown all season is really, really strong. And he's probably up there for the most consistent player of the season, if that was an award we gave out. Because again, like I said, I just don't think he's had a bad game. I mean, what do you guys think?
Chris?
Oh, I don't know yet.
Okay, well I'll go then. I agree. I don't think he has had a bad game. And I don't think Adam Jackson has had a bad game, by the way. No. So if we're talking consistency, Paudie has. Paudie has 2 of them that have been sent off. Let me throw just something back. Which of our central defenders, sorry, I've got Y-Scout open, so it's a bit of a cheat. Which of our central defenders can contest the most defensive duels per 90?
I know, because you just kicked me out of the same screen. It's Alex Mitchell.
It's not Alex Mitchell. Defensive duels, the highest number of defensive duels per 90 from our centre halves.
I was looking at successful defensive duels, I think.
Is Sean Rowan.
There we go.
So there's something interesting.
That is interesting.
And I think when you throw Sean Rowan into that as well, the one thing that it highlights for me is how desperately unlucky TJ Ayoma is, because he's basically he's all equipped, he's ready to go. It's like walking onto the X Factor and thinking I'm going to win it this week, and looking, side to side, and the other people on X Factor with you that week are Elton John, Ed Sheeran, and whoever else, Ken Bonsall. Do you know what I mean? And then you're going, oh well, I'm not going to win this, am I? And even though I'm perfectly good enough, so I do feel a little bit for TJ. But yes, defensive duels won, by the way. Alex Mitchell 75.7, Pordy O'Connor 74.5, and Adam Jackson 73.68. Literally, there is nothing between these three defenders. There is nothing between them at all to differentiate how they've performed. Is that their ability, or is that the way that we've played, and you put a certain type of defender in a certain type of position and they do it? I mean, I think it's a little bit both.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. I think you've definitely got to praise their ability, because we've been waxing lyrical about Michael Scrivalla since he's come in, and rightly so. But something that's been a constant for us has been our defensive solidity ever since Mark Kennedy. And Jacko and Pordy, of course, were staples in Mark Kennedy's side as well. And Michael's done a great job in terms of making sure that we keep that defensive solidity. He came in and says, the first thing I need to do is make sure we keep what's good before we add anything going forward. And that consistency at the back, and that just sheer desire to stop the opposition scoring goals. I think you can't buy that. I don't think. I think you have to create that and build that over time. And yeah, obviously Alex has come in this season and just embodied it, I think. But I think he was able to do that because Adam and Pordy were there already, kind of laying the groundwork, and kind of setting the standards for that to an extent. So yeah, that's my 2p's worth.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's a strength of all three of our centre halves as individual players. But then, like you say, we are playing a system, and the style obviously supports that. But that would be useless if they weren't just as good as they are. So that's the thing. It's the chicken and the egg kind of scenario. What does come first? If anything, they just work in perfect harmony, and that's exactly what we've got. Like I said, that strength in depth in defence. And Sean Rowan on that left-hand side obviously is absolutely outstanding, as well, as we've mentioned time and time again already in the first 25 minutes of this recording, because he deserves so much praise this season. Young player of the season, I think, voted for by Stacey West readers as well. So huge credit to all of them there. And like I say, it's a big shame really for somebody like TJ, who just can't get into the squad, not through any fault of his own, purely for the fact that everybody ahead of him is just so good and can't be dropped in any way. So let's take a little move a little bit further forward up the pitch then, and have a look at a comparison between Ted Bishop and Danny Mandroiu. Obviously, we spoke about them a little bit earlier. I went for Danny Mandroiu in my team of the season. You both went for Ted Bishop. Now, for those that watch the monthly show regularly, might think that I've got some kind of an agenda against Ted Bishop and I've got a man crush on Danny Mandroiu, because I seem to always pick Danny Mandroiu over Ted Bishop. But it isn't anything sort of personal in that sense. It's just I really like Danny Mandroiu as a footballer. I think he makes our Lincoln City side better more or less every time that he plays in it. Ted Bishop, I've always had this kind of level of skepticism with him. For the first couple of months of the season, it was he could only really do it when he was coming off the bench, and he really struggled when he was starting matches. And then for the second half of the season, I always had that little bit in the back of my mind of, okay, he's nearing the end of his contract. And Danny Mandroiu is the same, I'm aware, and I maybe shouldn't do that and being cynical, but I've always kind of had that little sort of niggle in the back of my mind. But Ted Bishop has still excelled even beyond anything that I'd ever been able to hope. But in terms of these stats, their minutes, Danny Mandroiu edges out on Ted Bishop by 250 plus minutes. Goals 8-4, but obviously bearing in mind that Danny Mandroiu has been taking our penalties. Assists 5 for Danny Mandroiu, 4 for Ted Bishop. Pass success percentage is 75.1 for Mandroiu, 81.3 for Bishop. 51 shots to 41, 17 on target to 10. Fouls drawn, 39 for Danny Mandroiu, but this is where Ted Bishop is fantastic in the midfield, 47 for him. And then interceptions, because I feel like we have to include a couple of defensive stats as well, purely based on the fact that they've both played deeper roles at parts of the season. Danny Mandroiu with 26 interceptions, with Ted Bishop on 18. And I know, Chris, you've got a load more stats as well. I mean, there's really not that much to split these two, though, is there?
No, there isn't. I think that's certainly defensively there isn't. So you made a point there in terms of interceptions, but I've looked at a lot more in depth defensive bits and bobs in terms of recoveries, ball losses, loose balls won, in addition to and just overall defensive duels, they are near as makes a difference. And that's not to say they're bad at it, by the way. They're both perfectly capable defensively, but they are comparable. I think what is really apparent is they're different players in possession and in an offensive way. So the real big comparisons here are Danny Mandroyu hughtly ahead of Ted Bishop in regard to through balls and through balls. So through balls attempted and successful through balls. He's actually played the 8th highest amount of through balls per 90 out of the whole of League One. And for a team like us that doesn't have a huge amount of possession, doesn't play top half number of passes per game, that's actually really stands out. And the fact that his accuracy is sort of in the top 20 or so in League One of every single player for through balls is really impressive. So I think what stands out for Danny Mandroyu is he has the ability to find that pass, to pick a pass, and most importantly, see a pass that I don't think anyone else in the team can do. And I think that has to be credited. Whereas Ted doesn't perform badly on his passing stats at all in terms of his just keeping the ball. I see he plays more passes, plays more successful passes per game. But what Ted really, really stands out with is his progressive runs. So his dribbles. He runs with the ball more than 2 dribbles more per game than Danny Mandroyu. He is also 15% more successful. So he's significantly outshines Danny Mandroyu in terms of his dribbling. So basically, if you want someone to run with the ball forward and also not lose the ball in their own half ever, and to keep it simple, kind of in possession with his passes, then you have Ted Bishop. If you want someone who's maybe not going to be quite so aggressive in terms of dribbles, but is going to spot a pass and maybe have a lower pass percentage because he's trying to spot them and then they're high risk passes, but that might be the pass that unlocks the defense that gets you in and scores a goal, then Danny Mandroyu gets the shoe in. They're actually very, very different players. So to pick between them is quite difficult. Like, unlike the centre halves, where they are all really comparable, and you can put one in instead of the other. For Danny Mandroyu and Ted Bishop, they're actually very different. And I think if we all agree that if we had Ethan Hamilton fit, then he'd play with Arahan, and then you're picking between Mandroyu and Bishop. I've gone for Bishop because of his. I think I just feel a bit more comfortable with him. I love Mandroyu in terms of his ability to find that pass, but there's always that higher element of risk there. I just feel a bit more comfortable with Ted in possession, certainly deeper in the team. But there's an argument that different opposition require a different player in that role.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact they are heavily different players, then does that maybe mean that we can play them both together, Gaz? Because obviously you've said a lot throughout the season that they're 2 players that you maybe wouldn't want to see on the pitch at the same time for Lincoln, but I think actually towards the back end of the season they've been on the pitch at the same time a couple of times and excelled in it.
They've done well in it. Let's not take recency bias purely into account. We're looking at the whole season here, and there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever if Ethan Hamilton's fit, only one of Danny Mandroyu or Ted Bishop play. That's a given. So they probably can play together. I think pre-Michael Scabala, you didn't want them to play together, because I think it left us looking a little weaker. Post Michael Scabala, with the way that he kind of manages players individually and gets them to alter their game, which I think we've seen, you can have them playing together. Let me be a little bit play devil's advocate there. Neither of the numbers in those minutes columns are enough for a player to be a massively positive impact. I don't think. When you think of Adam Jackson's minutes, is in excess of both of those players. So we haven't quite seen enough of both of them for different reasons. Ted with his injury record, Danny with his disciplinary record. Potentially that's why they're League One, rather than having been picked up to go higher, because in terms of technical ability, they can both play higher. I'm also looking at the goal involvements. Now, to be fair, Y-Scout's slightly different. It actually says 4 assists each, so that's by the by. Ted Bishop, 3 goals from open play. Excuse me. 1 penalty, 1 missed penalty. Danny Mandroyu, 3 goals from open play, 5 penalties, 1 missed penalty. Let me put it another way. TJ Ioma, 3 goals from open play. And again, I know that's a comparison where I see Chris smirking and you're going to say it's different. TJ's coming on, he's getting forward at corners, he's picking up the scraps. I get that. But again, we're talking about two players here whose ability is bigger and better than League One. And we're comparing the number of goals that they've scored to TJ Owen. We're comparing the number of goals that they've scored to Ethan Hamilton, who missed half of the season, 3 goals from open play, 1 assist. So I just think what's really frustrating is we're talking about 2 good footballers here. 2 good footballers who are on their day are as good as anybody in League One, in my opinion. But their day just doesn't quite happen enough. And for me, if you've got a player like that in the squad, it's fine. If you've got 2 players like that in the squad, potentially with it being a squad game now, with it being 16 players or whatever can get on the field on a Saturday afternoon, maybe you can carry it. But I do just think if it was one of these 2 that had been injured in the last 3 months of the season and not Ethan Hamilton had been fit, or McGrandles had been fit, I don't know. When they're good, they're very, very good. When they're good, they are fantastic footballers. I buy that. The reason I think I've picked Ted is because I just like that ability to get on the ball and drive forward a little bit more. And I think Danny Mandroiu, perhaps he's technically a better footballer. He picks better passes. He sees more things. But and this, I don't want this to sound detrimental to Danny, but it may well do, because I'm going to use a word that I don't particularly like. I just feel Ted's a more honest footballer. I feel Ted's a more kind of, there's never a question mark over what Ted puts in. There's never a question mark over his discipline. The only question mark is over Ted's fitness. Whereas with Danny Mandroiu, rightly or wrongly, there have been question marks over other elements of his game.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, it is a squad game, and there is the opportunity to potentially have one or both of these, in the future. And obviously, we've had them both for the past season, which is obviously what we're reviewing now. And they've both, like I say, had those fantastic games individually, and they've both been part of strong runs at certain different times of the season. But like you say, they are 2 very, very different players, as Chris very much alluded to with all of the stats. And I think some of these stats very much show it. And hopefully I think we'd have probably hoped just to get that a little bit more out of, at the very least, one of them, if not both of them, this season. And talking of other players, talking about this being a squad game, this is a 16-man squad, if you like, in terms of players that can get onto the pitch on a Saturday afternoon. Let's compare some of our squad players. So these are 4 players. For more attack-minded players, I could have included like a Jack Burrows in here, but I wanted slightly more comparable players. There's 4 different squad players who've all played less than 1,000 minutes, but have definitely had a big impact for different reasons in this Lincoln City League One club. Now, first of all, Dylan Duffy. I mean, I really, really rate Dylan Duffy. I think he's the perfect sort of backup player for Rico Hackett, if you like, in that same position. Freddie Draper, who obviously only spent half of the season with us, the same as Jack Moylan as well. And they both managed to accrue 750, give or take, minutes. And Jovan McCarmer, who I think last monthly show I praised heavily for the impact that he was very much starting to make. And he's played just under 1,000 minutes as well. I mean, goals, couple each for Jovan, Freddie and Dylan, but then 4 for Jack Moylan. Obviously, as we know, he had those 2 games where he really did excel in back-to-back matches. Loads of sort of different stats in there as well. Now, how imperative is it, Chris, that you've got 4 players who are actually quite as strong as these being a part of the squad?
I think it's really important to have a squad. I think and depth. I think we've learned that. I think we've got stung with that a little bit at times this season as well. Let's be honest, with the injuries that we've had. But I think it's been great that we've been able to give these, because they're all obviously of a certain age profile, aren't they? They're not the sort of players. Everyone wants to play. Everyone wants to play every minute of every game, but they're not the sort of players that are going to demand to start. But they've all absolutely had a role to play. I think in spells they've all really impressed, to be honest. Dylan, most recently, when he's hasn't had that many opportunities under Michael Skubala, had a fantastic game against Cambridge, and then been in and out of the team a little bit. But I think when he came on against Portsmouth, for example, he made things happen. Freddie, again, has been in and out of the team, but has shown flashes of what he's all about. He needs to kind of just tidy up parts of his game, but he's absolutely shown flashes. Jack Moylan, we know the little run he had, just basically was like the best player in the world for about a fortnight, wasn't he? But to be honest, the player that I've been most impressed with, and I think deserves the most praise, is Jovan. I think Jovan has, in terms of the development that they've made this season, I think Jovan has just come on leaps and bounds, and he's obviously one that hasn't yet had a development loan. He's just been kind of thrown in the deep end, had a little bit of stick from some supporters, and obviously that goal against Leyton Orient helps in regards to his kind of relationship with the fans. But I just think his all-round game he's really matured. He's really, really matured this season. And I think it's gone from us having no strikers to actually having, including Ben House, we've got kind of a front two, kind of a senior front two in Taylor and House. But then you've also got, albeit two teenagers to bring off the bench in Jovan and Freddie, but players that have shown that they're really capable and can have a role to play at this level and can be effective. So, yeah, I think they all deserve credit, but I wanted to kind of give a special mention to Jovan there, really. And
don't forget Tyler Walker as well, in terms of the striker chat. He's obviously a part of that as well. But Gary, who's impressed you most out of those four?
I think it's really hard to pick. What I would say, sorry, excuse me. What I would say, I think it's interesting looking at the number of minutes, because those minutes, I think, from Who Scored take into account when you come on to 90 rather than actually injury time. So a handful of those players may have played more minutes, but that's by the by. The point we're making here is squad players, very much so. It's hard to pick one and say he's impressed me the most, because they've all impressed me in slightly different ways, if I'm honest. I think Fred, towards the end of the season, began to show glimpses of what Walsall had seen, and that I found impressive. I mean, we're going to talk about his goal against Cheltenham, but obviously he also scored at Reading. He was beginning to put himself about a bit. He was just unlucky with injuries. Jack Moylan came in a flash, and I think if we're going to be brutally honest with Jack, we saw the very best of him for 2, 3, 4 games. But either side of that, he was a little bit anonymous, because he was being asked to play in unfamiliar positions, or he was being asked to do a job for a longer period of time. He was dropped in at the deep end, perhaps at times. So for me, that leaves 2 players to compare in terms of picking my favourite from these. That's Dylan Duffy and Jovan McCarman. I did an article on Dylan. Did you write it, Charlie? No, I wrote it. An article on Dylan Duffy. Just kind of saying he feels like he would benefit from a loan, but because he's crucial to what we do in terms of that squad of 16 rather than a starting 11, you've got to keep him around at the minute. If in the summer we sign a left back, or if Jaden Brown hadn't kind of dropped the ball a little bit during his spell with us, Dylan may well have gone out on loan. But he's kind of stayed around the club, maybe by necessity, maybe on performance. But then you flip that over to Jovan, it's exactly the same. If Tyler Walker and Ben House don't get injured, Jovan probably goes out on loan. Jovan could probably do with a loan. But therefore, I've got to look at the 2 of them and say, which of those have come on the most? And it's got to be Jovan, because Dylan, we knew what Dylan was capable of, but at the beginning of this season, Jovan McCarman was a player that nobody thought was going to play serious minutes for Lincoln. And we talk about the striker situation. We talk about not having a striker before January. We did. We had Jovan, but we didn't consider him as part of the strike force. He's a young kid. He couldn't get in a team at Brackley, etc., etc., etc. But at the end of the season, he's coming on over and above Fred Draper when Fred's on the bench. Why? Because he's big, because he's strong, because he looks a more intelligent footballer now than he did 6-7 months ago. He's not. He's the same footballer. He's being coached better. He's being treated better. He's having clearer instructions on what he needs to do. And the fact that he's got a couple of goals, and we're here in the end of the season situation with these players on the screen, and both me and Chris have gone, Jovan's the one that's impressed us the most. I think that's a huge credit. And by the way, may I just say, when Jovan first came through and went out on loan, nobody thought he was going to be challenging Freddie Draper for a place in the Lincoln first team. He looked gangly. He looked awkward. He went out to Gainsborough. It looked like he was going to be non-league loan after non-league loan. And he's come back from every little loan he's been at, from wherever he's been. And when he comes back, the club are suitably impressed with him to keep him around the first team squad. And that is a massive amount of respect, I think, to Jovan personally for what he's achieved this season.
Absolutely. I want to echo those thoughts, because there was a stark difference for me, and I think I mentioned it on a podcast after Leyton Orient, or it might have even been the last monthly show. There was a stark difference between Bristol Rovers away back at the start of September, when we didn't have a striker really, but I think we started Rico Hackett up top in that game, if I remember correctly. But Jovan came on with about 20 minutes to go, and he was great off the ball. He was running and chasing the ball down, but then when he had the ball at his feet, his decision-making wasn't at it, and he didn't have the technical ability. Then I compared that to Leyton Orient, where he came on, he was running the ball down, and then when he got the ball at his feet, he was able to make the right decision, and he had the technical ability to beat his man and then score the goal. That's a stark difference in the space of 6 months, just over. That again, is a huge credit to all of the coaching staff and to Jovan as a player himself. And I mean, even in January, when Freddie Draper came back and we're talking about Ben House maybe being fit soon and Joe Taylor coming in, one of the conversations was around, okay, does that mean that now Jovan's going to go ahead and get a loan move for the second half of the season? And nobody really had him in their heads as a part of the plans for the second half of the season. But then he came in and he scored 2 goals, same as what Freddie Draper has done. So, huge credit to Jovan. And like I said, when we've got these 4 players who are still very young, will hopefully progress going into next season as well, with a full pre-season under Michael Skubala. Sky could really be the limit for all 4 of these young footballers, which is a real sort of credit to each of them. Okay, so we've praised loads of players already today, but there is one player who we all picked as our player of the season. I'm sure most people could probably guess. We've been reveling in this guy's performances all season. And that is, of course, Ethan Erraghan. So these are his season stats. Almost 4,000 league minutes, 43 starts, 77 interceptions, 67 tackles won. For the record, that interceptions is top of any League One player from the site that I got it off. I mean, sure, Y-Scout might have it as different. I don't know. Tackles won, it was like 10th or like between 10th and 15th in the top 10 in terms of just midfielders as well. Pass success percentage, 82.5%, 4 assists and 0.4 key passes per 90. I mean, those are some pretty incredible stats for a pretty incredible player, aren't they, Chris?
Yes, they are. Not a surprise, I think. We always talk about stats, and then we always talk about the eye test separately, don't we? And sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. All these numbers do is prove what everybody knows when you watch Ethan Erraghan play. He is, let's be completely honest, he is too good for League One. He is a cut above League One and is every inch a ready-made championship holding midfielder. And I think the fact he's also transitioned from playing in a double pivot into just literally holding that pivot by himself and has excelled in it. I would say he's actually been more impressive since he's been playing there by himself than he has when he's had some support from another number 6 next to him. I think something you mentioned, Gaz, on the most recent pod, I think, when we was discussing him, is that he is just that calming influence. Whenever there's chaos around him and around the game, he just puts his foot on the ball, he will settle things down, and we can all breathe a sigh of relief. But when something needs to happen, when we're maybe just a bit off it, or where there's a bit of a lull, he's then the one to spark something into life, spark something into action. I think his game understanding is superb. We will know his kind of his game management. I think that is a genuine attribute. I really do. I know it's not everyone's favourite thing, but you've got to be good at that to win games. We've seen, in my opinion, even though Derby came second, the 2 best teams in the league this season are Portsmouth and Bolton, and both of them know how to win ugly, and that is part of being a successful team. Ethan Erraghan is absolutely superb. I remember we played away at Burton. Obviously, we had Alex Mitchell got sent off in the first half, which unbelievably ridiculous decision, but we was up against it. Obviously, been on a tough run up to that point as well in terms of wins. Performances had been improving, but we hadn't won it until that point. And Ethan Erraghan had the referee wrapped around his little finger for the second half of that game. At one point, the referee was giving him a hamstring stretch. But that you've got to manage your game. You've got to manage your game, and you've got to manage your opposition. So on the ball, off the ball, absolutely superb. But actually, it's just game understanding, tactically, and that kind of darker side of the game is underrated, I think, in terms of its level of importance. Yeah, just superb football, absolutely superb footballer. I still can't believe we've got him, to be honest.
There's 2 ways that you can be and I won't swear, but an outhouse, let's call it, a toilet. There's 2 ways you can do it. There's the Chris Maguire way, where you're doing it, but you're not really backing it up. That's what you are. That's you are an irritant. You are there to cause trouble. You are there to do that. And people can either respect that or not. Personally, I don't. And then there's the Ethan Erraghan way, in that it's just one facet of his game. If you take that away, if you take the chatter away, and you take the getting into people's heads away, and you look at the footballer, he is an outstanding footballer. Michael Skubala, I think, called him the best number 6 in League One. I haven't seen enough of all of the number sixes in League One to agree or disagree. But when Michael Skabala talks, I tend to believe him. If he tells me my milk's off, I'm going to go and buy some more milk. Do you know what I mean? That's how much I trust this guy. So if he tells me Ethan Arahan's the best number six, and I've seen Ethan Arahan play, and I think he's the best number six Lincoln City have had in a long while, and that includes Liam Bridgecut, by the way, then I think that's what he is. We can stats tell you whatever you want. That's fact. You know, I love stats. You two love stats. You can put whatever stats. You could find a stat that makes Ethan Arahan not quite look as good as he is. I'm sure there'd be a stat there somewhere. There would be. Chris mentioned the eye test. Jack Mulhall and Andy Pearson are watching this. They will love this. The eye test tells me that Ethan Arahan's been our best player throughout the season. He had a very little dip, but it was a minor dip, and it was around the same time as the whole squad. He scored perhaps the most crucial goal of the season, the late one at Wickham. You know, for me, he's got captain written all over him, and the only reason he hasn't been captain this season is because we already have a captain in place. People talk about teams not having leaders. We've got 2, 3, 4 leaders. Ben House is a leader. Paudie O'Connor, captain, is a leader. Ethan Arahan is a leader. Adam Jackson is a leader. I think long-term Alex Mitchell is a leader. That's one of the reasons we've done so well, because you have leaders there as well. And every team, every good organism, everything that's living has a heart. Everything that's living has a core, something central, something that you build around, whether that's a person's heart, whether that's a football team. You've got to have that. You've got to have that right in the middle, and that's Ethan Arahan. There was nobody else, seriously, you could name as player of the season. There's plenty of people you could say, he had a great season, he had a great season, he had a great season. There is nobody, hand on heart, that you could pick that had a better, more complete, more impactful season at both ends of the field than Ethan Arahan, in my opinion.
100% agree with that. There was no real debate in terms of who we were actually going to pick as the player of the season. We all just picked him. We all picked our own independently, and we all picked Ethan Arahan, and that says it all. I just want to add on the point you say about him being a leader, and also about his game intelligence. And it harks back to a press conference. It was after that Wickham game, actually, where he scored, and he did the post-match press conference. And this was the first game where we played with 2 strikers, first game where Joe Taylor was in the squad with a little bit more pace to sort of running behind. And he specifically made the point of saying, we misplaced some passes today. I misplaced some passes today because I just need to learn to play this system a little bit more, just get a little bit more used to it. And that's something I want to go away and do. And he was specifically putting his hand up and saying that. And obviously then for the second half of the season, he had worked on it and was making a lot of those passes as well. So just everything about Ethan Arahan is fantastic. I just really, really hope that we can keep hold of him for a potential promotion push next season, but who knows? We'll have a little look on that. But there was one player who... Sorry, go on.
Can I just say, by the way, about Ethan Arahan, I'm just looking at his appearances. Bear in mind, he's, 22 years old. I think he turns 23 in 3 days, perhaps. He's only 2 or 3 appearances shy of already having played 200 games. So when we talk about having experience in the side, you might look at a 22-year-old and go, he lacks experience. And I know some of the interviews towards the end of last season with the management team and coaching team, where we have to remember he's 22. He's got nearly 200 games already under his belt. And you're talking here, Scottish Premier League as well as now League One, which is a good level. So if the boy moves on in the summer, and there is talk about that, for me, it needs to be 7 figures, and it needs to start 1.5 as a bare minimum.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, because he means probably more value than that to us as a player for next season. So that's the thing, we would need to get that good value. But look, although we all independently agreed on Ethan Arahan, there were a few players that were certainly within a conversation that are close to being up there for player of the season, but not quite hitting that level. Obviously, Sean Rowan we've spoken about a lot. Lars Sorensen for his consistency all season, but also this man, Lucas Jensen. Now, I've got some stats up there for him, but also that compared to where he ranks in the league. 45 games played, he's equal for 4th. There's only, obviously, he could have only played 1 more game. Goals against 39. That is 3rd in the league when you only take into account players who've played 30 or more matches. Obviously, goalkeepers have played 30 or more matches. Goals prevented, 10.23. That is more than double his nearest competitor. Obviously, he's top of that one then. Saves, 135, puts him 3rd. Save percentage, 78%, puts him at the top. And clean sheets, 19, has him equal at the top of the league as well. What a player Lucas Jensen has been, considering we've been so blessed with goalkeepers over recent years. What a permanent signing this has turned out to be.
Yeah, absolutely superb. He has shone this season and been just so reliable as well. And like you say, the goals prevented stat, the way it sounds, it doesn't sound great. Say, he's only stopped 10 goals, but this is basically every single shot he's faced is given an XG score. As we all know, we all love XG. We all think it's a useful. So basically, if an XG is an XG of 1, then the goal is expected to go in. So the goalkeeper isn't therefore expected to save it. So basically, Lucas Jensen has saved over 10 goals combined over the season, more than he would be expected to save. And like you said, the next best is less than half of that. He is miles ahead, absolutely miles ahead of his competitors in that regard. He was a genuine close second for me for player of the season. Arahan, as you say, I think you can't take him out of the team and expect us to play with the same level of competency. He is one of very few irreplaceable players. I think if you take Arahan out of the team, you cannot replace what he does. Whereas with Jensen, this is more of a praise, I think, for Jordan Wright than a criticism of Jensen. When Wright has had to step in, he's been reliable. Jensen is excellent, as we can see. But you take him out of the team, and this team still functions. Maybe not quite to the same level, but still functions really to a high standard. Take a Rapin out of the team, I think there's just a gaping hole missing there in terms of his ability. So but Jensen was close because, as you can see, compared to his peers, he's the only Lincoln City player in any of the metrics on Wyscout, for example, where there's a Lincoln City player at the top of that list as the best in their position in the league, and that's Lucas Jensen, and it's by a mile. So yeah, he's been just fantastic.
What do you think, Gary? One of, if not the best goalkeeper we've had in recent seasons?
A goalkeepers union, isn't it? You're all waxing lyrical about Lucas. Okay, 2 points. First of all, Alex Palmer, Carl Rushworth, Lucas Jensen. I'd trust any of those three over the last 4 seasons. And to split them is difficult because you are talking about different goalkeepers with different defensive structures. You know, Carl Rushworth kept a lot of clean sheets last season, but we were set up very much not to get beat. But that did mean that he faced an awful lot of shots. Alex Palmer, I think we played 4 at the back when we had Alex Palmer, so you could argue it might be a little bit tougher, although we often played the double sixes, so did he have more protection? So I think they're 3 very good goalkeepers, and the defining difference is that Lucas Jensen is our goalkeeper. But I honestly, if I had to pick one of those and say I think he was the best goalkeeper, I'm probably going to go with Carl Rushworth, if I'm honest. But you know, he's an England under-21 international. You know, he's Player of the Year at Swansea. He's going to probably play for England in his career. So you know, it's tough, and that it's not disparaging on Lucas. What I'd say about Lucas, and particularly goalkeepers, is it's hard for a goalkeeper to win a crowd over. I think it's harder for a goalkeeper than a striker. Joe Taylor comes in, right? Doesn't score for 4 games, puts 2 in 2 games. He's a hero. Everybody loves him. Jack Moylan did nothing for a couple of games, scored 2 goals in 2 games back to back. Everyone's calling him star boy. He's going to go on to be £1 million player. Goalkeeper comes in, concedes a goal. It's hard to come back from that. Josh Griffiths never did. Josh Griffiths never bounced back from conceding the goal against Gillingham early doors. First game of the season, it was a mistake. And then I think he did one against Wickham. And people then found it hard to trust the goalkeeper. There's a natural distrust of a new goalkeeper that the 10 outfield players don't quite have. Because if you distrust an outfield player, there's 9 of his teammates around him. He can be hidden a bit. It can be you can talk about the team he's in. With a goalkeeper, it's really lonely. And I'm not a goalkeeper. Really lonely, and there was a wave of feeling around me in the ground at the beginning of the season. Well, I'm not sure about this new goalkeeper because they talk about his distribution, which I don't think is as bad as people make out. I think we've had, it's really not. And they talk about him, is he going to be as good as the ones we've had in the past? It's really lonely. For me, the way that Jensen just powered through that, and he probably didn't hear it, he probably doesn't know about it, but as I've heard hearts and minds change around me, that is the strongest testament, irrespective of goals prevented, which is brilliant. All of these numbers are absolutely brilliant, but it's the trust that he's won in the fans. It's almost like the numbers back it up, but he's won the eye test over from a really difficult position. And by the way, the one stat that you can't really put in here, which I think probably think is his strongest, is his command of the area, because he commands his area superbly. He very, very rarely comes for a ball and misses it, and he always makes the right choice. Does he punch it? Does he catch it? I think that is superb, and that prevents more goals than an XG shot. Do you know, he prevents more chances than he prevents goals, in my opinion. So that's my thoughts on Lucas Jensen.
I mean, 100% agree. I think he's been a fantastic goalkeeper for us. Hopefully he can be the exact same next season. But let's be honest, a good few championship clubs are going to be circling, because just the stats, the eye test, everything backs up what we already know about Lucas Jensen being a top level goalkeeper. I mean, Burnley getting relegated from the Premier League, they probably wish they still had Lucas Jensen in their ranks, even though obviously they do still have a few other top goalkeepers themselves as well. So yeah, Lucas Jensen was a close kind of second or third, if you like, in terms of the player of the season rankings. All right, that is basically it for all of the stats. We are going to get the graphics off the screen and have a little chat about some of our best moments of the season. All right, then. So, as we've said, there's so many great moments, so many great goals from what has been a fantastic Lincoln City season. So let's start with the best game, the best moment, if you like. Gaz, why don't you kick us off? What's been your favourite game of this 46 or even longer game season, if you want to include a cup game?
I think it's really hard to pick a favourite game, which is crazy because I suggested that we do it. So it's quite ironic.
Yeah, thanks for that. You know, it's all right.
but no, there are that many games from this season that stand out, and I don't think we could say that last season. Yeah, I think in previous seasons you go, oh, we beat Sheffield Wednesday, so it's that, or it's the win at Sunderland, and everybody picked. But I think that we've all picked different games for different reasons. And I've actually picked a pre-Skubala game. I've picked Charlton at home because I think it just had a little bit of everything. It had the former manager coming back. He was in good form at the time. Charlton weren't doing too badly under Michael Appleton. We put a scratch side together. We were struggling for a team, really. You know, Hacks was playing up top. It was in that kind of tough moment. Mark Kennedy had left. There was just basically we should have got tonked. They should have come and beaten us 2-3-1, something like that. 2-0, 3-1, whatever. They should have with the players that they had. And I just felt we were excellent on the night, and it epitomised for me everything that was good about the squad that we hadn't seen enough of. But got to talk about the story of the game, and I think the story of the game was threefold. First of all, there was last 11 shots. It was the highest number of shots anybody had in any of the two divisions, and I think if I remember correctly, I think somebody from Mansfield had the same number of shots on the same night. Was it the lad that used to be at Burton, whose name escapes me now, Lucas Akins, I think it was, wasn't it? And so that was a bit of a story, because to be fair, Michael signed last. Didn't really get in the side. He played him twice at right back. He flopped both times away at Shrewsbury was really poor. So that was big. Sean Rowan scoring, he enjoyed that goal. And at the presentation evening, I was listening to some of the players talk about the goal of the season competition. And Sean Rowan, by the way, said, I think I should win it for the celebration against Charlton. There was a real, I think he realised, because he had a nightmare under Michael Appleton. But it was the night of the Hacks. And in the story of this season, there are a lot of positives to take away, and very few of them will be around Hakeem Adelakan. But what he achieved in that, up until that game, after that game, by the way, until he left, he was pretty poor. I think that was his pinnacle. That was his story. That was his culmination. He's happily ever after. But for him to get 2 goals, for us to beat Charlton, a side who I thought were going to be very tough, convincingly, it wasn't just the result. It wasn't just the 3 stories. It was the big sign being held up that said everything isn't as bad as you think it is. After the Burton game, after Mark Kennedy leaving, the uncertainty, we're all right. We've got a decent squad. If this is the foundation, if this is the starting point, beating Charlton 3-1 and showing this amount of dedication, you're going to be all right. And there's other games I've come away from buzzing, but I came away from that game believing for the first time since probably West Ham in the Cup.
That was a really, really special night. Like I say, it was a culmination of everything coming into that. And I'm going to go into that in a second. But Chris, what was your game or moment of the season?
Well, moment and game's different. So I'll quickly touch on a moment before game. The moment's probably a strange one. My favourite moment of the whole season was immediately after Portsmouth scored their second goal. and the whole stadium stood up in applause of the team. We all knew it was over at that point, and it just felt special to be a part of. Like, I've never seen anything like that at a football game before. A team that's consigned to defeat, but it was just sheer appreciation of how far the club have come, the effort that the players have put in the management. Obviously, we had the pleasure of speaking to Michael on the presentation evening, and he said he'd never seen anything like it. And that it just felt I had a lump in my throat when it was going on. I really did. It really meant something. Again, that if there was ever a moment in the season which epitomised that unity and that togetherness that I mentioned at the head of the show, it was that moment then in defeat. So that was my favourite moment of the whole season, despite it was obviously a gutting moment as well. But my favourite game was Shrewsbury at home, winning 3-0. And obviously going into that, we'd been an ever-improving side ever since that last-minute equaliser from Ethan Arahan at Wickham. Sorry, obviously we'd had the 3 draws on the bounce. We'd got that first win for ages away at Burton against all odds. We'd come back from a goal down against Fleetwood. We got a decent away draw at Charlton. We'd just got a 1-0 win against both Exeter and Port Vale. So it was on a good run. And we were all saying to ourselves, like, we're improving a lot here. Someone's going to get a battering at some point. And it all came together against Shrewsbury. And albeit it was a poor Shrewsbury side, but it's the most dominant I think I've seen us be ever, to be honest, genuinely ever. Well, under in the last 2 seasons, it's the most dominant I've seen us be. We could have won 8-0 that night. Genuinely could. And it was for me, it wasn't just the goals, it wasn't just the domination. It was just how in tune everyone was. It's like everyone gets it now. We have an identity. We know who we are. Everyone's bought into Michael Scriboli. He's had the time on the training ground. And look at it, basically. But Shrewsbury couldn't get out of their own third for the majority of that game. We just pinned them in. Everything was a trap, particularly into their left back. Everything was so meticulously planned and executed to genuinely near perfection. So, of course, as we all know, the next 3 wins after that were 5-1, 6-0, and 5-0. So it wasn't Shrewsbury that was going on to get the battering that we thought that it was going to be. It was just a battering. But for me, that was where I just came out of that game just absolutely buzzing, just thinking, yeah, if that's what we're going to be like, if that's us on our best, then we're going to win a lot of games of football. And obviously, it transpired that way. But yeah, it was just the most complete performance. So that's the way I picked that game.
Yeah, absolutely agree with you on that. Now, for me, my favourite game / moment, if you like, it's more the game, and it's a bit of an outside one. Is actually Burton away. Now, the game itself, in terms of the football quality, wasn't exactly the best. It's hard to play good football on that pitch, and Burton really weren't a very good side to be playing against, and they just weren't a good side overall, to be fair. But it was we went 1-0 up. We'd been on a winless run of 9 games, I think, if I remember correctly, going into that game. That could have made it double digits if we didn't win. And we go 1-0 up through Rico Hackett. Really nice goal cutting onto his weaker foot. And then it's the last 10 minutes of stoppage time or something like that the referee gave. And you had Lass Sorensen, and you had Ben House, who had just come back from injury as well, just to have that icing on the cake. We had Ben House and Lass Sorensen in the corner flag for about 10 minutes. Because that showed how much a victory on that day meant for those players, because they needed that. And then to sort of come away from that and go on to sort of the winning run and the unbeaten run that we were already in the unbeaten run by that point. Then to go on a bit of a winning run as well was incredible. That, for me, as much as people talk, and I talk about that last goal against Wickham being that big key turning point, that goal and that victory against Burton was just as important for that. So I just wanted to sort of mention that one. So then let's go on to goals and that moment as well, because, guys, you didn't really give a moment either. So why don't you give us your goal of the season and also your moment of the season, if they're different?
Well, my moment of the season ties into my game of the season, if I'm honest. And my moment of the season wasn't at Sincilbank, and it sounds really petty and it sounds really kind of like a little bit underhand. But my moment of the season was the phone call telling me Mark Kennedy had left the club, because it just felt like a release, as the Charlton did. You know, if the Charlton game was the look what we can achieve, the Mark Kennedy leaving was you can now go ahead and achieve it. And funnily enough, that relates to Burton, because that game against Burton that we lost 1-0 at our place, we were stodgy. And it was easy to point at Danny Mandroyu's red card and say, that's why we lost it. It isn't. We lost it because we weren't good enough to beat Burton. It's that simple. We weren't attacking enough. Things had begun to come away. And I'd begun to get that feeling of not enjoying going to Sincilbank. And I got that for a period of the Michael Appleton second season where we were, losing to Hartlepool, and we lost. Who knocked out Hartlepool? We lost to somebody in the league at home. It was just defeat after defeat after defeat, and it was like, this is tough. And I didn't want that, because I felt that still feel this is the most talented squad that we've had, arguably, in my lifetime. Certainly comparable with the Brennan Johnson, Morgan Rogers season of play in terms of players we own. This is the best squad that we had, and we had that in October. So that was my moment of the season, just because I felt it was a reset. It was a good opportunity to go, right, now what are Lincoln City about? What can we actually do? And it's meant to be no disrespect to Mark Kennedy or Danny Butterfield, who I'm sure meant well. My goal of the season was, it was actually the last one we scored, wasn't it? It was the very last goal of the season, and it was Fred Draper at Cheltenham. Now, I think that it's criminal that this wasn't listed by the club as a potential goal of the season contender, because I think in terms of technique, there are very few goals you'll see that show the same level of technique. Now, I'm not old enough to remember this, but there was a goal scored in the 1958 World Cup final by Pele, and there's another one actually by Frank Worthington that's quite famous that gets shown, where they flick the ball up over their heads, spin a defender, volley it in. The technique is phenomenal. They're the sort of goal you look at and you go, that is outstanding. Fred didn't flick it over anybody's head, but the tight control in the area, the way he adjusted his body, the way he didn't have to drop, he knew everything, all the space around it. Was a natural finisher's goal. So it was a good goal. It wasn't the best goal we've scored. It was a good goal. But then there's the added, we'd been 1-0 down. We've got back to 1-1. This is the goal. It was everything that it meant as well. This takes it to the final day of the season. And it wasn't a tap-in. It wasn't scruffy. It was a great goal with a huge amount of importance attached to it. So for me, it was the goal of the season. And if I'm looking for a positive moment of the season, it was that as well, because I was in Chris's living room at the time, and he'll testify that we were both nervous as hell from lunchtime onwards. And that was just bang. Now, boys, go off and enjoy your gig. You've got another week of us being in contention. It was that we've taken it to 46 games. So for me, that's goal of the season.
Yeah, I think it was a fantastic goal, and I don't quite get why it wasn't nominated, especially considering Joe Taylor's was in the same game. And I'll be honest, I actually thought Freddie's was a better goal anyway. And I think Freddie also agreed, and I don't think he was too pleased that he didn't get given goal of the season either. So, Chris, what about yours?
Yeah, probably slightly left field. I think the way I've looked at this is which one kind of did I enjoy the most, really? Because I think there's the obvious one. I think what ended up being the most important. I think there's an argument of definitely Freddie's there. There's an argument for Ethan Arahans that started that run against Wickham. You mentioned Rico Hackett's goal against Burton as well. That could be up there. For me, the one I just lost my mind celebrating the most was Jovan Makama scoring last minute against Leyton Orient. Like, just this stadium erupted, and Sincilbank has not erupted like that I can remember for a long time. A goal that at the time felt like it meant so much. Obviously, nothing better than a last-minute winner, is there? And yeah, none of us expected it, did we? None of us expected it. We were expecting, okay, it's a decent point. It keeps us in contention, and then bang, 3 points. And I just lost my mind celebrating that goal. It just, that surge of dopamine and adrenaline. It's just, you can't replace it, can you? And obviously we've had some big goals recently in the last few weeks, but for me, just that was in the ground. Obviously, me and Gaz watched the Cheltenham game here, so we weren't in the ground for that. You'd probably got a different feeling if you was actually in the ground. But yeah, Jovan Makama, last minute against Leyton Orient for me.
I mean, yeah, echo that, because that release, like you say, that moment it just seemed to go on for ages. It seemed to be like we're celebrating in slow motion, just because of how much you wanted to sort of bottle up that feeling. And what made that even better was the fact that Shrewsbury had equalised against Oxford like 2 minutes before as well. So it sort of just capped everything off for a brilliant Good Friday and a great start to the Easter weekend. I think for my goal of the season, I'm actually going to go for one in that Charlton game at home that we spoke about. And it's the Hakiba Delican, I think it was his second goal, where there was 24 or 25 passes and every single outfield player touched the ball before it went into the back of the net. And there was an overlap between Jack Burrows and Lars Sorensen as well, and then playing the ball into the middle, and it was Hax's second goal of the night. And everything about that goal sort of summed up the exact story that Gaz was talking about that game. And it just showed that unity, that togetherness, and everybody celebrating immediately over with Tom Shaw. That's what that game was about, and that's what that goal summed up for me. And that was another one of those where it was, okay, we can see what we can do now. This is what we can do going forward for the second half of this season. So then when Michael Skibala came in and kind of added to that, and we started seeing more of that, it was less of a surprise because we knew the players could do it. And that's, very much where the huge credit goes to for that goal for me. So look, that is everything. We've had stats, we've had players of the season, we've had teams of the season, we've had moments of the season, goals of the season, all of that. It's been a fantastic season to be a Lincoln City fan. Thank you so much for joining me, Chris, all season long on these monthly review shows. We'll have another one back probably at the end of July now. Thank you so much for joining me as well, Gaz. Enjoy your summer with no football. Up the Imps.
Up the Imps.
All the Imps.